Hello devs, today I'll be showing you how to build this cool little caterpillar effect to use with any project or use as a portfolio piece. You'll need to have HTML and CSS under your belt to build this, but if you don't, it should be fairly simple, as I'll guide you throughout this tutorial. If you ever get lost throughout the tutorial, I will leave a link in the description below. Be sure to check that out, and without further ado, let's jump right in. So first things first, we want to have two files, an HTML and a CSS. We just have some simple boilerplate text here with the hello world. And if you downloaded the live server, you could just right click and go to open with live server, or you could use the shortcut Alt-L, Alt-O, which I will be using. And now we can see we have our app running. First things first, we want to link our style sheet. So to do that, we'll do link relations style sheet with href equals index.css. It's a self-closing tag. Next, we want to add a div with a class of container, which will be used to center our project. Next, we want to create another div with a class of caterpillar container, which will hold our caterpillar effect. And then finally, we want to create another div with a class of caterpillar and set it to 6. I can actually close that. And we want to copy this 6 times. We're going to have the lowest number at the bottom because that will appear on the top of the stack when displayed on our terminal or in our port. We could just number those accordingly. And believe it or not, that is all for the HTML. We could save it and move on to the CSS. For our CSS, we first want to add some default styles to our project. So we could use asterisk. You should use a margin of 0, a padding of 0 as well. We're going to use box sizing, border box, and I personally like to set the font family to Gill Sans. Just makes it look a lot neater. We're going to set the body to a color of EEE, which is kind of like an off-white color. We're going to set the background color to 1E, 1E, 1E. It's like a darker tone. And we could save that, and we see it displayed in our web browser. Next, we want to create a container to center our caterpillar, which we have done so in the HTML, and we are now going to set the width to 100 view width and the height to 100 view height. We also want to have a display of flex, justify content center, and align items center. This is how you center your containers inside of your code. We then want to create a container that will hold our animation and keep it from breaking. And we have set the name to caterpillar container. For this, we want to have a background color of light gray, a border radius of 20 pixels, the position relative, a width of 40 rem, and a height of 40 rem as well. As soon as we save that, you can see we have our container and our numbers. Next, we want to style the actual div containers with the class of caterpillar. We're going to set the position to absolute, the background color to white, the width to fit the content, border radius to 30 pixels, padding of 7 rem, font size of 4 rem, the top we're going to set by default 15%, and the right to 15% as well. As soon as we save that, we can see we have our numbers still. I think I misspelled this. There we go. Now that we have our default styles finished, we can now get to the fun part, and that is animating our caterpillar. First things first, we're going to use the CSS selector nth child. That targets the first child element with the class name caterpillar, in this case what we're using it for. This selector selects a specific element from a group of elements based on its position. So we could do .caterpillar nth child, and we want to target the first one, and we are going to set the background color to, I actually have some predefined colors here. To make it easier, I will leave the link in the description below for you to check out the code. Next, we want to have an animation. And what this animation does is it takes in 4 things. We are going to pass in the animation name. In this case, it is going to be called num1. The duration, which is 6 seconds, a delay of 2 seconds, and how often we want to repeat the animation, which will be infinite. Now we want to do that across all the other caterpillar containers. So we can just copy and paste this 5 more times. And then we could change the nth child to target. And we also want to change the color for each animation. Next up, we want to change the animation name. So this will be 2, 3, and so on. And finally, we want to change the delay for each of the animations. I'm sorry, I actually meant to put the delay for this first one to 5 seconds, all the way to 0 seconds. The reason we changed the delay for each caterpillar div is so that they don't all animate at the same time, or else we will only ever see the top level div. Now that we have set the animation property for each div, we're going to work on the actual animation itself. We'll be using keyframes. And what keyframes is it's a way to define styles throughout the animation sequence. So for our first keyframe, we do add keyframes. We called it num1. If you go back here, we called it num1. And then curly braces. Now we can define how do we want our animation to change from 0 to 100%. So first things first, we can define our percentages. The more percents you add, the more smoother the animation transition will be. So we want to add quite a few. So let me just add that here. Now at the start of our animation, we want to be transparent and come into frame with its color. So to do that, we can set the background color to transparent and set the very next color to the color it was given. So we had it as this color for the first one, and we can just place that right after. We also want to move the boxes from the top, say 10%, and from the right 10% as well. We now want to increment that by 5s from 0% all the way to 100%. So in each of these, we can just copy this, paste this, and increment them by 5s. And we just do the same thing. We could save that, and now you could see our animation hasn't started yet. Oh, there we go. As you notice, we just only did number 1, which was the first caterpillar class here. So we're only animating this first one. If you notice how all the elements are still in the same stack position, how 6 never moves up above 1, that is because the Z index, which is the position of where it's placed in the stack, is still the same throughout the animation. So to fix this, we're going to change the Z index for each part of the animation's keyframe. So let's just say we start at 9,100. You don't necessarily have to start here. We could start at 0, but as long as it's incrementing by 1, or incrementing at all, it would still work. But for this case, we'll just stick with 9,100, and then just increment that by 1 across all of the percents. Now that we've done that, you could see our 6 is above the first one now, because it's incrementing its position in the Z index plane. Now that we have this first one working, we can just repeat this process for the rest of our caterpillar divs. But before we do this for all the rest of the divs, I forgot one thing. At the end of our animation, we want our container to be transparent again. But what happens is if we put it at 100, you would see it slowly dissipates from starting from where the background color was, this color, up until 100%. You would see it disappears. To prevent this and only have it disappear right at the end, we can just copy the background color and paste it right before we want it to be transparent. And when we do this, you'll see it stays its solid color up until right at the end of the animation. And then it's as if it disappears and then reappears. Now we could just copy and paste this and continue for the rest of the div containers. There we have it. Now you have a cool animation you can use for any project or just a cool portfolio piece. If you would like, you can easily just change the background color properties to design some interesting caterpillars or change the direction of the animation by playing around with the top and right positions.